Hello again. In our last video, I walked you through creating this beautiful table topper. And if you went along with the whole video, you've got your table topper done as far as the top is concerned and the piecing is done. But now it's time to get it finished up with binding, finishing the edges, and I'm going to show you two different ways of doing that and getting it quilted. So then it is ready for your table. So if you're ready for that, stay tuned. Hi, I'm Wendy Haney, and I love quilting, and I also love mentoring and teaching others to fall in love with quilting too. And I know that if you find that it's easy and enjoyable, you're much more apt to stick with it. So that's what I'm here for, because I know what a great benefit quilting has made to my life. I love sharing it. I love sharing the things I make. It's a part of my life, and it's my happy place when I get to come down and quilt. Okay, so here we are. Last week, we got the table topper done. I also mentioned I had another set of colors that I was debating about doing a table topper for, and so I decided to do that. So this morning, I got another table topper done. And here's the back of it. And this way, I can show you two different ways to complete your table topper. One is, sometimes people refer to it as birthing it. Basically, we're going to sew all the way around the edges of 3 layers, and then we're just going to flip it right side out, and that way the edges are all done without putting any binding on it. So very little handwork, because when I do binding, I do hand stitching for the last piece of it. Otherwise, I'm also going to show you how to take my other finished table topper, and we're going to actually put a binding around it. That way you're going to learn how to do that as well. Okay, let's get started. Okay, I've done some of the work on this already. As I said, I made a different table topper with my other second fabric choices, and I've already stitched around the border. So here's what you're going to do. When you want to do the birthing method of finishing the edge of your table runner without putting a binding on it, you need to take batting, your backing, and your top, and you're going to layer it together. So cut out a piece of batting that is, I don't know, about a 1/2 inch larger than the top, than your table topper, and then cut out your backing about the same size as well. So then you're going to put your batting down on the table, smooth it out, make sure it's nice and flat. Get your backing, make sure it's all ironed, nice and smooth, and then you're going to put your backing on top of the batting with the right side up. Then, you're going to put your table topper right side down. So the key thing to remember in this scenario, batting is on the back, and then your backing and your table topper are right sides together on top of that. And then when you sew a 1/4 inch around the edge, so do a 1/4 inch from the edge of your table topper. So just, you're doing your 1/4 inch seam around the edges, and then leave about a foot, there we go, about a foot I left where I did not sew it, because you need an opening, and make sure it's big enough. You're going to want at least a good foot for your table runner to flip it inside out. And then once you have your seam a 1/4 inch around the edge of your table topper, then put it on your cutting mat again and trim away the excess backing and batting. So then you just have your 1/4 inch seam like anything else you're doing. Then, don't forget, when you're sewing, and in this case putting all those 3 layers together, you're going to want to use your walking foot. That'll be so much easier for the stitching because you've got 3 layers of fabric, and you want that to be fed through your sewing machine easily. So that's where your walking foot comes in. Okay, and then you're going to open up your little package here, if you will, and between the top and the backing, that's where you're going to want to come inside, and you're going to want to flip it. So you're just going to start grabbing the corners and the edges and you're going to pull them through the hole, and you're going to want to be careful. And don't pull too much. I tugged a little bit too hard the first time, and I ripped a little bit of the seam for the opening, which, you know, if that happens, that's all right. You can go back and, because we're going to have to do a little hand stitching anyway to wrap that up. And there we go. Oh, before I forget, on the edges, after you've trimmed away the down to the 1/4 inch of your batting and your backing, you're also going to want to trim your corners, because you don't want a lot of bulk in your corners. So I just trim them. Actually, what I do first is I cut off the corner, and then I cut a little bit on both sides. So I just get a nice little V, making very sure you're not cutting into your seam. But you want to cut away that batting and extra stuff, because otherwise if you don't, you're going to have a hard time getting nice points on the corners after you flip it. All right, so now your backing should be your right side up, and your table topper should be right side up also, and, oops, hold on here, the batting should be in the middle. If you layered everything right, this is what will happen. And then, oh, fiddlesticks, oh, there it is. Then I take my purple thing, and I just go into the edges, go into the corners, and I just go in there with my purple thing, because the purple thing it's plastic, and it's not like super sharp that it's going to go through the corner of your fabric, and you just push through there and get nice even corners. And guess what then? You've finished your top already by having a nice seam there. And then you're going to go get your corners all nice and punched out, and then you're going to go to the iron, and you're going to iron all those seams, making sure they're nice and neat around the edges. And then we'll look at, and then what you'll do is you're going to fold in, you might need to cut away a little bit of the binding, sorry, not binding, batting, with your scissors just to get rid of some of the bulk. And then you're going to fold in your edges in that section where you left a hole to pull everything out. And then you're going to fold it in 1/4 inch on each side and iron it, and then pin it. And then you're going to have to go and get some matching thread, and using a slip stitch, you're going to sew up that hole manually, not using the sewing machine. And then you're going to have a nice even seam all the way around. And then after that, we're ready for the quilting. Okay, I did the stitching all the way around, and I showed you how to flip that out, and then I hand sewed the edge that was opening by just folding in both sides 1/4 inch and using matching thread to slip stitch that open, or closed I should say. So there we go, we have your table topper. Now it looks done, but you really need to quilt it in some fashion, because this is just too big of a space to not have some type of stitching, because, well, it's a table topper, which means you probably are going to have to wash it at some point in time. And with all that space that's not quilted, it's just, there's nothing that's going to hold all the pieces together. You're batting inside, and you're going to have problems, which is why we quilt quilts. So in this case, this situation, we're going to quilt it. Basically, it's kind of an odd order. Because of how we had to do the edges, you have to quilt it after it's all done, because otherwise there was no way to flip it around. So in this case, you would go through and you're going to do exactly what I'm going to tell you to do on the other table topper that I haven't finished the edges. So whether you're doing this piece or the one where we're going to put binding on, right now you're going to need to quilt. So toss that over there. Okay, so what we have is here, I have my table topper that I finished last time, and I have a piece for the backing that I have cut. Let on some part of it fairly large, and others I've just got a little bit around the edges. But cut it so you've got at least about a ½ inch around on each side. And then you're batting the same thing, so you have enough around the edges. Then make sure, as with the other, you've got your, in this case, you've got your backing on the bottom, right side down. So basically it's exactly the way it's going to look when it's finished. Your backing on the bottom, right side down, then you lay your batting out, then you lay your table topper right side up. So this is how it's going to be finished. Make sure everything is ironed and all, smoothed out and ready to go. Now you're ready to quilt it. But before you can quilt it, you really need to pin all the pieces together. And you have a couple ways of doing that. The most common way is using, I was going to say paper clips. Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a complete, safety pins. Wow, shows how often I use that word. In fact, it took me quite a while to find these. I knew I had them in a tin somewhere in the house, but for the life of me, I could not find them. But I finally did. This is what happens when you move things around, you lose them. Anyway, safety pins. So most people, when they quilt something with their domestic machine, their regular machine at home, not a long arm, they use safety pins to pin together all 3 layers of their quilt. So we're going to just do that. And some people go and get a, I've heard they use spoons and other methods, because if you're talking about doing pinning with larger quilts, well, your fingers might get a little sore. The other thing I want you to think about as you're deciding where you're going to place your pins, you're going to want to think about, okay, how do I want to quilt it? A lot of people starting out, the simplest thing could be stitching in the ditch. And what I mean is stitching right inside your seams. So you're not doing anything that's really going to be visible or fancy. It's just you're going to go and you're going to follow the inset of the seams and secure your 3 pieces together by that. Okay, with that said, talked about it before with sewing your 3 pieces together on the other table topper I showed you. You're going to want to use your walking foot, particularly in this, because your walking foot will make sure it's pulling all your layers together, because the top of this will help feed the top layer of your table topper, and then the feed dogs on your sewing machine are going to help feed the bottom, and that way it's going to feed those evenly so you don't have any problems. So get a walking foot for this. So with that said, if you're stitching in the ditch for your quilting, okay, great. That means you're going to want to do your pinning in the areas that you're not quilting, and that way it won't get in the way of things. Yes, those safety pins. Okay, so we got safety pins. Well, here's another way that I discovered a while back, because personally, I was doing baby size, lap size quilts on my regular machine, and safety pins, they were a pain in the butt as far as I was concerned. So I discovered these, they're called pin moors. Basically, there's these little, like a little bit like gummy squares or something, but there's these just soft things, so you can use, got a thread there, so you can use regular pins. I like the flower head pins, because I use them for my long arm. You pin them, and then you pin them in, really easy, and then you just throw one of these spongy things on the end of your pin. And that way you aren't doing a couple things. If you just use pins, you know what's going to happen? You're going to catch your fingers, your hands on them. That's going to hurt, and you're going to bleed, and that's going to make a mess. And you catch your thread on it and snag things. So safety pins or these little things to put on top of your pins. And I will find a link for that and put those in the description below. So either way, go around, pin all 3 pieces together, and then you're going to go to your sewing machine and put on your walking foot. And then the other thing is when you're first learning to quilt and you're particularly doing it in the ditch, you don't want the thread to show. That's kind of the whole point of stitching in the ditch. But if you used a colored thread, in this case I have a fairly dark table topper, so I could probably use brown. You know, it's still going to show through some. So you have a couple options. There is invisible thread. Yes, they're mine are kind of getting all over the place here. You have clear and you have smoke. Personally, I prefer smoke. The clear, you'd think, well, look, one's dark and one's like white and clear, and you're not going to see the clear. But the clear has a tendency to catch the light, and you'll get reflections off of it to know that it's there. Whereas the smoke, it looks clear when you're quilting, especially in the ditch, and you're not going to get any reflection of light off of it. So smoke is my preference with that. And Wonder Invisible Thread, I think that's what it says on the bottom. Yep. So go get some of that, and you're going to want that both in your top thread and your bobbin for 2 reasons. One, if you decide, oh, well, I'd like some color on the back, well, when you stitch, your bottom thread is going to come up to the top. And then you've got 2 different weights of thread that you're trying to work with, and it's just going to get messy. It's just get messy. So get your invisible smoke thread and put it on your bobbin and put it on your top thread. And then when you quilt, you want to quilt from the inside out. So I would start around the center square and then, out to your corners, a row, etc. And in this case, let's see. Actually, to minimize the number of starts and stops, you could like start here and there and there and there and there and there and there. You can kind of figure it out and go, okay, minimize your starts and stops, because in this case you will want to backstitch some every time you stop. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go and we're going to get this quilted. Then after the quilting is done, then in this case we put on the binding. And of course I moved it. I don't know where I put it. Oh, there it is. Did I say something earlier about when you move things you can't find them? I already cut my binding, and in this case I have decided with the dark color of this last border, I really like it, and so I want my binding to match it. Whereas this one, I was like, I'm not so sure. I thought it needed something more, so I added a little bit extra brown border that actually kind of acted as a binding, and I think personally it really kind of tied it all in and did that. Just kind of wrapped it up. Well, when I tried to put a brown around here and see what it would look like, it didn't do anything for it. So I cut 3 2.5-inch strips for my binding, and then now I lost, there we go. And when I do my bindings, I do the stitch, so I don't do it straight across, I do it at an angle. And in that case what you do is you lay out your fabric like this, and then your other piece you're going to lay out this way. And that's shown in the corner up there. And that way then you get your angle, and it's nice and even, and you don't have a lot of bulk when you fold that over. So then you've got your bindings all sewn together, your 3 pieces sewn together, and then once your table topper is quilted, then I would leave about, 8 inches or so, and I would personally, start in the middle of one of your sides. and you're going to pin on your binding. You're going to just pin it on. Pin it on, and then you're gonna stitch it till you get 1/4 inch from the bottom, and then you stop. And then what you do is, trying to do this and show it to you when it's backwards for me. Oh, that's fun. Well, I'll show it in a screenshot when I'm right side up and I can show it to you the right way. So right now, I'm gonna go finish pinning this and getting it quilted, and then we'll come back and talk about the binding. Okay, now I'm going to start quilting my table runner. I have it table topper. I have it all pinned, and I have my smoke thread. Now, with this type of spool, I find it oftentimes better to have it upright. So if you have a sewing machine where you can, set something up and have the spool upright, that would be great. If not, I have a spool holder, which I'll take a photo of for you to show you, over here, and then I string it up and over and thread it. And I'll tell you, I'm going to be honest with you, working with this thread, it's thin, plastically, hard to see, and it can be a royal pain in the butt sometimes, but it works really slick. So I have this, my top thread, and I have it in my bobbin. Have my walking foot on. Key thing to note as you're getting set up, your walking foot is helping to pull the fabric through. So the last thing you want is to be starting here, up here, and then having this fabric down here hanging off your sewing machine, or here over on the edge where it could get stuck, because that is going to cause it to tug and the walking foot not being able to pull it through because there's too much weight. So what you want to do is, kind of fold it up. In this case, this is why it's good to start with a smaller project. So fold it up so that you're working in a little bit smaller space and that you can feed it through and just kind of manage it. And don't be afraid to stop while you're quilting it and rearrange a little, make sure everything's okay, because that is just fine. Okay. Finally got my needle threaded with this pesky thread. And so now what I'm going to do is I am going to start in the middle. Because what I suggest you do is start in the middle and work out. And that's what I'm going to do. And we're going to get all situated, and then I'll show you how easy this is to do. Okay, so I did mention that we should start in the center. But at the same time, I also don't want to go around in a square necessarily. So I actually am going to start here on the top, and I'm gonna go down my seams from the inside out. And yep, gotta find that pesky thread. Drop my needle, and I want my needle right in that ditch. So we're going to show you just make sure table toppers up here folded so we don't have anything to tug on. As you can see, it's just pulling it along, and I did a little back stitch there, and I'm not pushing it, pulling it, I'm just letting it do its job. You just guide it to stay in the ditch. And there you go. And so you stop, you unfold it a little more, make sure everything's nice and smooth, and you do it a little more. I have a machine that I can actually push a start and stop button, but I prefer to use my foot. So I have much more control by using a foot pedal. So I can speed up, slow down as I need. So I'm going to just finish stitching this up, and then we'll come back and see how it looks. Okay, I'm back and I have the quilting done. So a few things that I want to point out as I discovered as I was working on this. I'll admit I'm a long arm quilter, so it's not very often that I use my regular sewing machine for quilting something. But I actually discovered, you know what? This can be very handy once in a while when I'm working on something small and just need it quilted without anything fancy. So here's a few things to keep in mind. Figure out your path. Excuse me. As I mentioned, you kind of want to work from the inside out so that you keep things, you know, nice and smooth. I actually started up here in the top and went all the way down. And then I think I went up there, I went up here, and I went up there, over there, down there, over there, down there. So attempt to kind of find a path so that you're not starting, stopping, starting, stopping all the time. It will make things easier for you. And then, of course, you're stitching in the ditch and you're like, did I do that part? Oftentimes, you're gonna wanna flip it over and look at the back once in a while, so when you stop, you flip it over and go, okay, have I done that section? What I started to do is as I stopped and had to find another spot to start, I started taking the pins out of my blocks. So when this block was completely done all the way around, including the angle, I took the pins out. That way I knew, okay, that's done. So eventually I got to the part where, okay, I just had, you know, one angle and then around the edge. Keep that in mind. It's not going to be perfect. Right here, I'm looking at it. You can't tell my lines. If you were to pick it up and start poking at it and really looking at it, yes, you're gonna see your stitches occasionally. That's okay. Don't worry about it. It's okay. It's stitch in the ditch, but nobody's perfect. It's the way it is. And that's why we use the invisible smoke thread. So it's really kind of can't see it. But then if we flip it over to the back, there went my notes. You can see we've got my lines. And in this case, it's pretty invisible on the back too because of the color of fabric I have. You probably can't hardly see it even with the close-up. There we can, a little bit more. Then I went and had to do, so eventually the whole inside was done. I flipped it over, I made sure everything was smooth. If for some reason it's not quite as smooth on the back anymore, then repin your next layers. And then you just find a corner and you start and you do your outside border. Now, you do not need to stitch in the seams of your borders, of where those are. All you're gonna do is stitch around the outside portion of each border. So we've got our brown one and then my orange one. And so now that is done. So now I am ready to put on the binding. I actually went around and smoothed out things to make sure, and then also, I'm gonna move this one in. I moved some of my pins in a little closer to the middle so that I don't run into any problems when I'm putting on my binding. Okay, talked about creating your binding before. So I've got my binding, and to figure out how much binding you need, measure all the way around, all four sides, measure around that, and then add, oh, you will probably want a foot. I would add an extra 12 to 18 inches. I'm one that I'd much rather have my binding a little too long than not enough. So be aware of that. I also do my binding when I create it so I don't put just, you know, straight edges together. I actually do my binding on an angle, so that will take up a little extra fabric as well. And then when you fold it around the edges. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take and have about, I don't know, 12 inches or so. And then I like to start my binding on the middle of one of the sides. And I stitch I stitch this way, so I put it on my sewing machine. So I'm going to just have about a foot there, and I'm going to, there's my pins. For a minute there, I thought I lost all my pins. I'm one of these people that I have multiple places I'm sewing at around here, and things have a tendency to move with them. So I'm a pinner. If you're not, that's okay. I'm a pinner. So I'm going to pin my binding on. So we're going to just pin my binding so it's nice and ready. And with this, once you get your binding pinned on and stuff, leave your walking foot on your sewing machine. We're going to do this. And what you're going to do is, and for a beginner, you might want to grab your marker and mark a 1/4 inch from, grab a little ruler, a 1/4 inch from the edge. Because what we want to do with your binding, you want to start, so you've still got your tail, so start on your first pin and sew a 1/4 inch from the edge down, but you want to stop a 1/4 inch in from the edge. Because what you're going to do, and I'll show you that in a minute after I stitch it, is you're going to then flip it and have it in a position to sew the rest. So the easiest thing, especially for a beginner, is actually mark it. Mark it right there. So that is where I want to stop stitching. So I'm going to just secure that last end there. Okay, so we've got that. I am going to go sew that quickly, and then I'm going to be right back and show you how we're going to flip it. Okay, so now I've sewed my binding 1/4 inch from the edge, and now let's see if I can do this. There we go. We're going to flip this around and do it this way. So otherwise it's backwards for me. So here we go. So what you do is you flip your binding up. Let me make sure. There we go. You just flip your binding up, kind of at an angle there, and then fold it down. So you're going to then fold it down so the top is now even with the top of your table topper there, that corner, and then see, it's got a little angle there. And then you're going to want to start stitching a 1/4 inch in again. Okay, so I am going to, whoops, my magnetic pins. So I'm going to pin this, and then here, once again, I'm going to, there we go, come on ruler. I'm going to do a 1/4 inch in. So I put my ruler there, so I've got a 1/4 inch here and a 1/4 inch here. So basically where I'm going to put my dot right here, actually you could do this. You could just, there's your corner. So you're going to start stitching right there. Hopefully that is clear. There we go. So I made a 1/4 inch square there so that we're going to start stitching right there. And then you're going to just continue to do that all the way around until you get to your last side. And on your last side, stop, about 6 inches or so away from the start of where you started it, because we want some wiggle room in here, because this is where we're going to show you how to merge the two binding pieces and have a very nice completed side. Okay? So we'll get that done, and then I'll show you how to do the final binding of doing that. And then we're going to press it, and then for me, I do handwork for the last piece of it. Okay, I'm back and I have my binding on. One thing I forgot to tell you. It's not too late to do it, no worries. Okay, here on your binding, actually before you start putting it on, but if you did like me and went, oops, I forgot, no big deal. Towards the end of the, let's see if I can flip this around. On the edge of your binding here, you actually want one of the ends finished at a 45-degree angle. So what I do, I just folded it. I went up here like this. I folded it down There we go. I folded it down like that. So now I've got a 45-degree angle, and I went to the ironing board and I pressed it. So it's nice and pressed, and then normally you could use your rotary cutter, but since I'm doing this here, I'm just trimming that off. So now I have a 1/4 inch, more than a 1/4 inch seam, but my binding now has a nice finished ironed 1/4 inch seam right there. Okay? So that is, so if you had started your binding with this, you would have started sewing, you know, back here, which is kind of where I did. Okay? So now you've got this other tail that you finished, and as you can see, we got about 6 inches between them. So we have this over here, and you're going to be able to judge this based on how close you are to this 1/4 inch finished seam. So now what you're going to do, you want to tuck the tail of the other one inside your other binding. So we're going to just kind of figure that out, tuck it in, and you want about a 1/2 inch of fabric in there. Key thing, I know this is hard to see with the dark, is you want to make sure it's a 1/2 inch inside this last shortest piece there. Okay, so we're going to do that, and then, so I'm always one that's cautious, so I'm thinking I'm going to cut it about there. There we go. So now I can tuck that other binding in there, keeping my edges straight for everything. I know, it takes a little fudging. Then you're going to get this other binding piece, so that's nice on the edge too. And there you go. Look at there. You've got a nice finished edge to your binding. The other binding edge is tucked inside, so now we're going to take this back to the sewing machine and we're going to just finish the binding. And then they're all tucked in. Then what I like to do is come back and do, at least on the top side, because I'm going to roll it over, I come back and do a little hand stitching right in here to make sure that that's nice and secure and we don't have some place to catch things. So that is what I'm going to go secure right now. Oh, as long as I've got you here, before I go do that, the other thing you can do right now or right after you finish that binding is you can come back and we can get rid of all of the extra out here. So I have this nice, really long ruler, and so I'm going to just go around the edge of my table topper and trim off all the extra edges, the extra batting. Oh, look at there. Oopsie. Need to replace my cutter. This is a nice piece of scrap. That is a good size piece that could come in handy elsewhere. So we're going to keep that. Most of the rest of my edges are pretty bare, so we're not going to exactly have a lot of fabric left, so that will go into the scraps. And so we're going to just go around the edges and only do this after you know you've got your binding on and it's nice and secure. So there we go. I was cutting. I made the mistake yesterday of cutting, and I actually cut with another ruler underneath. Kind of made a mess of my cutter. I need to replace the blade today. Okay, so there we have it. So I'm going to do that all the way around, and then we'll move on. Oh, isn't that looking pretty? I'm really pleased with this. Okay, I have the binding on. It's all secured. I did a little bit of a slip stitch right here where the binding came together. Probably can't see that very well with the dark green, but I just found some dark green thread and I just do a little slip stitch that kind of hides the thread, but it secures it. So now there's no hole or anything to catch on there. Then I took it to the, actually you can see I trimmed all the way around. I took it to the iron board and pressed all the way around the edges. Okay, now we're going to flip it over, and here's where you're going to just fold it over. So you're going to fold over that edge of that binding so it covers your seam. And basically you just can kind of fold it and wrap it around, and it's going to wrap right around that leftover your seam. Therefore you've got some weight in there. And then on the front end, it's about the same distance all the way around. You can kind of feel it. And so you've got that there. And then, excuse me, when you get to the corner, you're going to get to the corners. And so for me, I slip stitch. I do my binding by hand. So I'm going to start up here in this corner. I'm going to fold that over and sit tight 1 minute. One of the important tools that I told you you needed, your binding clips. So, because I'm a righty and I slip stitch this way down my binding, it's always been hard to kind of hold this all and keep it there and do it while you're stitching. Binding clips are just handy dandy little things. So, I come through and I just clip my binding in place. So I go down one edge and I put, and it really doesn't matter which direction you put them. I just come down, make sure it's nice and neat. Well, getting my binding, you know, about the same distance, because if you wrap it and it looks about the same on, well, heck. On this side, it should look pretty close to the same on the other side. So I'm just going to come down my side here and I'm going to put the clips. Usually I do it just one side at a time. And so if we flip over, you're going to see you've got a nice, and it should be about the same. Okay, that one looks a little thin compared to the rest, so we're going to just adjust it a little. And it should be about the same weight. Don't worry about it. It's going to be good enough. If it's not quite exact, that's fine. That's just a nice little binding there. Then, so I'm going to do all the way down to the end, and then I'm going to get to the corner. And I'm going to show you it up here. Then when you get to the corner, so I finish it off, and then as you can see here, you've got kind of a nice corner here. And it's nice in the middle. So we're just going to wrap that. And you're going to get kind of this nice V in the corner there. And this is really hard to see. I will take some photos to show you. And then I just wrap that and do it again on the other side, and then I'm ready to sew that side. We just lost a binder clip. And then you've got a nice corner on the back side of your quilt, and then the same, a nice square corner that's mitered looking on the front side of your quilt. And you just do that all the way around, and then you have a finished quilt. I have some friends who actually kind of do this and pin it, or actually some of them are good enough, I don't even know if they pin it, but then they come over here to the front side and they use, for me, I would still use my invisible thread, my smoke thread, but they would come and they're going to just stitch in the ditch of the binding. And as long as you have the back folded over properly so it's covering your stitch, which is where the ditch is over here, by stitching in the ditch on the front for your binding, you're going to capture the binding on the back. And as long as you're not folding it over too far, it should end up very nicely. And you know what? It's not something I normally do, but this is a table topper, and I might actually give it a try on this one and see how that works for me. So it's totally up to you. You can try that method, or you can do what I traditionally do, which is I stitch this by hand. I find some matching thread and then I do a slip stitch all the way around by hand for my binding. And then it's done. How exciting. The other table topper that I finished, this one here, I'm still debating how I'm going to quilt it. I might still just go with the stitch in the ditch as I did before, But I also am debating about seeing if I can find a design for my embroidery machine to do something. So I've decided I'm not going to show you another format of quilting on this one, but I'll do that later, and then I'll catch you up on what I decided to do. So we're going to just leave this one for now. But the concept, the same concept of quilting this as you did the other one, I would still suggest you, even though you already have your edges finished, you're going to want to be very careful, spread it out, and use your safety pins to pin it just like you did the other table topper, and then quilt it exactly the same. And you should be good to go. And in that case, I would also, you quilt here, but then I would also suggest you quilt, stitch in the ditch, this very outside border, extra border that I added for this one. And there we have it. So now you have a finished table topper. Once I get mine done, I'll take a picture of it so you can see exactly what it looks like on my kitchen table. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a lot out of it. I really would appreciate it if you followed with this and you have a table topper done. Go over to my Facebook page, facebook.com/Wendy J. Haney, and please add a comment, add a post. I'll have a post out there for this YouTube video. Please add a comment with a picture of your table topper, because I'd really love to see what everybody's doing. Take care. I just had to jump back in here. Okay. I decided to do it. Talking about doing stitch in the ditch for the binding, and I realized, okay, the sewing machine has the smoke invisible thread in it. It's a table topper. What the heck? Let's give this a try. And I did. And you know what? Wow. That was so much easier. I actually still used the binder clips, and I made sure I clipped them so the white flat side was down, and then I just kind of took them out as I got to them on the sewing machine. And you know what? It's smoke thread. You can't tell on the top, and on the back, it caught it. I wrapped it around sufficiently such that it's not a big lap of fabric there at the back. And I'll admit, there were two places where it didn't quite catch the back of the fabric. So I had to go back, get it a little closer there, tack it down, and restitch it. Okay, you can't tell on the front, and you know what? You really can't tell on the back either. So I am incredibly happy that I gave that a try. And it just goes to show, never say never. And when I can see this very handy to do is table toppers. They're going to be on the downside. You're only going to have the right side up. Nobody's going to notice. Wall hangings, those kind of things. Once again, that nobody's going to see the back. But I'm also thinking I will seriously consider doing this on baby quilts. Baby quilts are quilts that are, yes, I want them to be a heirloom quilt that people are going to love, but I also want those kids to drag those quilts around until they fall apart. And with that said, they're also going to get lots of washing because I want them used. And with that, if there's going to be lots of washing, actually sewing on the binding rather than me doing my handwork will make those much sturdier binding that will wear better through all the washes and the wear and tear that a kid's going to give to it. Now, when it comes to heirloom quilts that I'm doing for somebody's bed, those kind of things, I will probably still do my hand binding. But I'm definitely going to be doing this more often than I ever have before. So there you have it. I hope you give it a try also. Or I also like handwork. So this, I could have probably sat down in front of the TV tonight or sat down with an audiobook and in a couple hours probably had it all stitched up. But that's a couple hours. Maybe I don't want to be watching TV. All depends on whether you're a person that loves doing the handwork in the evening and wants something to do, or you're a person that has things to do and you want to get it done and still have it look great. So there you have it. Take care. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to stay up to date with all the new stuff I'm dropping, subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell icon. That way you'll be notified anytime I drop a new video into the channel. I'll be posting new videos every Friday morning with lots of great stuff that you aren't going to want to miss. I also would love to have you join me in my Facebook group. I have a private Facebook group that we're sharing things about life that I love. Quilting, needlework, machine embroidery, wine, books, a lot of fun stuff. So I'd love to have you join me over there. You can find it at facebook.com/group/lifefulfilled. I also can be found at the normal ways: Pinterest, Instagram, etc. You can find in the description below all the links of the places to find me, including wendyjhaney.com. If you found this video helpful, I would love to have you give me a thumbs up, drop me a comment, let me know what you'd like to see. Take care, and thanks for watching.